Toma, Tonong, Car Chemboy, the Latin, the Saint Jean, Songi, Hong Toba, they cheated, and Arantata, Tom, Becusam, Chekawa Yeshe.
And once again, it is of greatest importance that we make sure that from the very outset our motivation is the proper one. Therefore, before we now set out to listen to these instructions, we could make it our motivation or intention to bring about the best of possible benefits by way of listening to these instructions in such a way that we think that we wish to bring about the establishment of all sentient beings in the state of Buddhahood, free of any suffering, free of the causes of any suffering. With this resolve, with this intention, which is the resolve of bodhisattvas, we should set out to listen to the instruction. The teachings which we are listening to here, which Rinpoche is giving to us, are those which are known as the 7 points of mind training. Of these teachings we have already heard that very generally speaking they are subdivided into 3 topics. First, there is the actual lineage of transmission through which these teachings have been handed down to us. Then there are the general topics of that which is generally to be known, and then there are the specific instructions. The specific instructions, yet again, have to be, of the first 2, the lineage transmission and the general topics we have heard already, and then we have moved on to the teaching proper, which again is being subdivided into that which has to be taught, that which has to be brought to the attention of the student, as well as the second part, which is all the advice from the masters of the transmission lineage. Among these 7 points, we have heard of the first one yesterday, which is the preliminary practice, and the preliminary practice again being subdivided into the topic of the actual practice that is to be performed, and the second topic being the instructions upon which these practices are being based. We will now proceed to the second part, the second point of these 7 points of mind training, which is the actual giving rise to and nurturing of the enlightened attitude or bodhicitta.
And Rangjung Chekawa Rangjung Tomala, Tenga and Roth, Jola, Davi Dangela, Lama, Gosung Damba, Tongi Jambe, Sentin Tangila, Gumba, Teta, Nansom, the Yo song. And then Lama, so and then song in song, and Chekawa Sanjela, so and Dabadua, or Tetamboma, the Jando Sentis, and Tenga, Mundro Tetambo, Yamin.
In the course of these instructions, we have heard how the actual session, the actual practically applied preliminary part is the praying to our own root Lama above our heads. To that end, we have heard the explanation of how we are to imagine this root Lama, namely sitting on top of a lotus flower and moon disk, which we imagine to appear above our heads. On top of this seat sits our root Lama with a smiling expression, regarding us, full of objectless compassion, which means compassion that regards all beings equally, not any beings in particular or others less so. Then, having imagined the Lama in this way, we go for refuge to him, we pray to him with one point of devotion from the bottom of our hearts, that in our own being and in our own hearts, this same resolve, this same wish of the Bodhisattva commitment may arise, may be born, and may be nurtured. And having started out with this imagination, with this visualization, we would proceed with our practice. We have been told how it is of greatest importance that we should start each and every session of meditation practice, whatever it might be, with this particular practice, prayer to the Guru, and doing so, as usual, we first go for refuge, place ourselves under the protection of the sources of refuge, we give rise to the enlightened attitude, and then we proceed with that particular request to our teacher.
Lama so Lama Penne, Naranga, Yende, Vekado, Naga, and Yamna Gunga, Yoptavati, Gunga Sakaji Yabata, Tatandi, Yovati, and Nando, and Lamate, and Chapter Jungle, so that Yo-Yo.
Having in this way prayed to our teacher one-pointedly with devotion and confidence, we then imagine how he proceeds to enter into ourselves through the crown of our heads and how he descends down to the level of our hearts, where he comes to rest inside a sphere of 5-colored light, which is roughly egg-shaped, open towards the top. In that sphere of radiating light, he sits with crossed legs and radiates kindness and loving. Having prepared ourselves in this way, we then proceed to the second point of the 7 points of mind training, the second topic, which is the explanation of how to actually give rise to bodhicitta, to the enlightened attitude, how to maintain it, how to nurture it. This second point, the way this is being explained, comes again under 2 topics. First, there is the peripheral explanation of giving rise to the enlightened attitude in accord with the actual way as phenomena and appearances truly are. And then there is the explanation of giving rise to the enlightened attitude, the bodhicitta, in accord with the world of appearances and phenomena as they appear. And it has been said, or it is being said in this commentary, that this explanation again can be subdivided into 2 major topics, being the actual session itself, how to practice during the actual practice session, and the other topic is how to practice during post-meditation, between sessions. And then, according to the first topic, the session itself, it has been said if we practice bodhicitta in accord with true reality, then in whichever way we start out by way of practicing the Guru Yoga meditation, as has already been explained. Having prepared ourselves through the preliminary steps, as have been described, through the preliminary steps of this Guru Yoga practice, etc., we will then proceed with the actual practice of now giving rise to bodhicitta, to the enlightened attitude or the awakened heart, in accord with true reality. Now, before we can actually set out to do that, we have to know that since beginningless time, since innumerable births after births, our minds have continuously been stirred by all sorts of mental activity, by all sorts of thoughts, ideas, concepts, etc. All of this has always, up until now, made it impossible for us to even be able to think of looking at the true nature of anything, for that matter. Therefore, before we proceed to do so, it is necessary that we first bring about a certain state of calm, a certain state of quiet, so that we are enabled in the first place to truly look at this true nature. In order to do so, it is necessary that we first take up a certain physical position. And the most important part of that physical position is that we should sit comfortably, but with a straight spine, with an erect back, and sit in such a way that the subtle channels within our body are straightened. It is said that when these subtle channels are straightened, then the subtle energies, the winds, etc., which move within these channels, can move freely. Once these can move freely in a natural and relaxed way, then also our minds will come to rest. And in order to bring about this restful, this peaceful state, having taken up such a physical posture, we would be well advised to sit like this for a short, brief period of time in order to let things come to rest truly. To that end, we are advised to concentrate for a short while upon our breath. As we sit in this relaxed way, as we breathe naturally, there is then the counting of the breath in such a way that we count one inhalation and exhalation as one. And this sequence of inhaling and exhaling counted as one, we repeat 21 times at least. Having done that, we make sure that at least a minimum of peace of mind, a minimum of a calm mental state is being brought about, which allows us to then proceed to look at the true nature of things in the first place. Let us now proceed to train in this. Rinpoche says time is short, therefore we will now not concentrate upon 21 sequences of inhalation and exhalation, but we will count 7 instead. Now we will proceed to the actual training in giving rise to the enlightened attitude of Bodhicitta in the first place. Now, while we're about to do so, it helps to know what this means. Generally speaking, when we talk about giving rise to Bodhicitta, we talk about the 2 types of Bodhicitta between which we have to decide which of the 2 we want to give rise to. Generally speaking, there is the so-called conventional Bodhicitta, which is that kind of Bodhicitta or enlightened attitude which is in accord with the world of appearances and phenomena. which normally, in most cases, is that kind of bodhicitta that allows us to contemplate loving kindness and compassion towards beings. And then there's the ultimate bodhicitta, the ultimate enlightened attitude, which is that kind of practice during which we look at the actual nature of our own minds itself in order to find out what that particular nature is about. Now, in the vast majority of commentaries and treatises which deal with this subject of bodhicitta, we are first advised to give rise to loving kindness and compassion, to nurture that within our beings, and in this way take the development of the conventional bodhicitta in accord with the world of appearances and phenomena as the first step, and then we're being advised that towards the end of the path, as we have proceeded along this path considerably, then the ultimate bodhicitta, which is in accord with the true reality, will eventually come to pass. This is how it pass. This is how it is generally described in so many different treatises and commentaries.
Chekawa Yeshe Dorje Rangjung Nibala Kanzo Sonju Yan Doa. Tati Yago Jumtinde, Bena, Tanin, Konzo, Kipa Chembuke, Rikin, Tanin Kunike, Dambayon Jungzi, Dodeva, Tanin Ombo, Nambo, Nindopton, Sherab Chambo, Tatan Rike Konzo Tanti Yena, Tiga on the Tin, Combo Tando Sonju Sandi, Gom, Niba Kanzo Sonju Sangom, Tendawala Gomni.
Now, in this particular instruction of Chekawa Yeshe Dorje's, these 7 points of mind training, this sequence is very obviously reversed. He first advises us to give rise to the ultimate, highest bodhicitta or enlightened attitude by way of looking at the true reality, the true nature of mind itself, of appearances and phenomena, and bring about an understanding of this. And then, after this, he advises us then to give rise to the conventional bodhicitta, which is the practice of loving kindness and compassion. We might wonder why that is the case, and one could think, says Rinpoche, that Chekawa Yeshe Dorje possibly might have had such individuals in mind to whom he was teaching these instructions, for whom he was composing these instructions, who are of the highest ability, those who are endowed with great courage, with great understanding, intelligence, and insight, that he advised such students, such practitioners and individuals in such a way that they should first take a look at true reality and then proceed with giving rise to the type of bodhicitta which allows us to practice loving kindness and compassion. This is the way it might have been.
Kenzo Sonson, Zola Gomba Song, Tiendo Tata Naran Tonga, Gomzak, take down, then Gomzak, Zo de Kenzo Sonju San Yindu, Titan, Yehi, Yila Yaw. Danton Sonju San de Chazung, Dubai, Trejoyan, Dubai, take Gomjoyan, then Choza, Dubai, Gom, take a son, then Danton Sonju San Chazung Yaw. Kenzo Sonju San, Zola Gom, Teichi, then Tambola Tanto Sonju San, Jabayimba, and Jiang, and inside his own.
Another possibility might be that Chekawa Yeshe Dorje thought it appropriate to give a very brief explanation of ultimate bodhicitta in accord with true reality, so that afterwards he could then continue to give a very elaborate, a very in-depth explanation of conventional bodhicitta, which is in accord with the world of appearances and phenomena. As it is in this particular text, this elaborate, rather in-depth explanation follows, so therefore he might have thought it an appropriate thing to give a very brief introduction into what is called the ultimate bodhicitta, which accords with true reality.
Chekawa Song, Chuno, Moron Double Song, only Zav, Teddy. He song. Neki Mubu, Zung Yurda Noma, that nom, Neki Zung Jude, Senegi, Jikin, Sene Jinji Tenson Tatangaron, Rawa, Kongchum, Genshin, Lasope, and then Jitin Jakamna, Soba Jindua, Tela, Yum Gashila, Yedo, Gashiga, Yortanjin, Yedo, Moon, Tedawando, Tetan, Sene Jinji Tenson. And then no judges and jeans on the tea, Tatiga, Benanjitella, Ne Deva, Chalk Debig, Madon, Don Rodon, So Chalk Last over. That is Tomji, no judges and jeans on. That Neji de Mubo, Zuma, Mubu, Chu, Zuma, Yordo, Zuma, Yordo, Jabari, Saint Neji, no judges and jeans, Tomji, then I don't, then your Tomji, Zotomji, make a number of heavy zoom yorto chorodoa, make a number of heavy sorrow, Tahinkin, down, then a red, then a conchumry, then a merry, then a tondro last, then this so zoom yorto chorari doa, or that in this one,
Now we proceed to the actual training itself. And again, here is a word of the root text by Chekawa Yeshe Dorje himself, who says, when starting out with the training of Bodhicitta in accord with true reality, think of all appearances as dreamlike. Then he continues in the commentary to say that all of these appearances are that which we call the outer world. The outer world, which is made out of all sorts of different kind of objects of perception, is made up of mountains, of valleys, there are forests, there are rivers, there's all the kinds of different things happening which altogether make up the outer world, all the different things, all the different objects which we perceive in such a way. Then this outer world also has a content, and the content are all the beings which inhabit this world, so all the humans which we meet, all the animals which we meet, all sorts of beings which in any which way interact with us. All of these, in turn, as we perceive them, bring about certain kinds of ideas of feelings within us. Whatever feelings of pleasure or displeasure, things that we consider to be desirable or undesirable, etc. All of these outer phenomena, be it animate or inanimate ones, make up the world and its contents, which we are to regard as dreamlike, according to Chekawa Yeshe Dorje.
Make yordo zona yordo no anda tangi wrong semjin pro no kona yin that bena make sort of zone na so pan tondo neki nige zone mandrawa mombo then na vega sort of drum mandrawa mombo tugundo wa then na sort of drum mandrawa tangi na sorgundo wa that de la so pa tangi de sort of yorde drum yo mares damba drop yo mares and Marute Tangi Semka, no Jakwana, the Semka Chaniti, your Tangi, the Sharing.
So there is talk about all sorts of sensory perceptions. When thinking of these perceptions, these can be subdivided again into various different types of perceptions. There are visual perceptions, which we perceive with our eyes, and there are perceptions by the way of sounds, which we perceive with our ears. There are scents, which we perceive with our noses, and then there are tastes, which we perceive with our tongues. Then there are tactile perceptions, etc. All of these perceptions are said to be free of any self-nature, are said to be illusory or dreamlike. So all of what there could possibly be that we perceive is to be looked at, is to be watched in this way.
Then Soroga Yorde, Demba Madrupa Yembe, Dala, then Aronzonga, Matangiga, Bena, then Santunga Gasu, Matangiga Sare, Santunga, what the Pacho Kibala Yoga Dai. Tayo Manga Hige, this on the Yedo One, this on the Yedo Moon, and the last over, then they get an Zaminga, and it's an
Now, what sort of indication do we have that all of these phenomena and appearances which we perceive are truly without any self-nature, free of any inherent nature unto themselves. If, for instance, we would look at any given piece of land, any given landscape, the vast majority of us would perceive it in very much the same way. We would look at this particular piece of land and we would all perceive whatever there is, a mountain, a forest, or whatnot. However, this is because we are all conditioned in very much the same way. However, if we were to examine the exact perception of each and every individual that perceives that particular object, that particular piece or stretch of land, we would come to see that each and every one of these individuals perceives this particular object in a slightly different way. The overall perception is very much the same, but the various reactions that are being brought about through our perceiving that particular object are slightly different. Some of us might consider this particular object as pleasant, others might consider it as unpleasant, or have all kinds of conflicting emotions and feelings in between these two extremes. Therefore, if we were to look very closely, we would have to come to see that actually the perception of any given object, for that matter, actually lies predominantly in the eye of the beholder and is ultimately free of being truly existent, of being truly real, or having any self-nature unto itself. To use another example, for instance, if we had a cup of water, beings which live in the God realms would perceive such water as pure nectar and enjoy it accordingly. We beings in the human realms, we see such water, as it presents itself to ourselves, as a liquid that we drink in order to quench our thirst. Or animals, for that matter, might also perceive water either as this water or as a habitat. Of course, they should be living in case of living in the water, like fish, etc. Beings of the hungry ghost realm, for instance, would perceive such water as blood and pus. Or beings which live in the hell realms, they would perceive such water as molten liquid lava. That again is an indicator for the fact that that which we call water itself, the phenomena that we call water, is not truly existent, but that the perception of that which we perceive as water solely lies in the eye of the beholder, in the way it is being perceived by the various types of beings. Now, on the other hand, we might argue, how is it that phenomena and appearances are not truly existence? If we were to come upon a sheer rock face, we could logically argue, well, this rock face is there. It blocks my way. I cannot pass through it. It truly is there. I can knock my head against it and it will be painful, and that's the proof it's truly there. Or we could, for instance, take the example of a fire. If we were to stick our hands into the fire, we would, of course, burn ourselves. We would feel pain, and in this way, we would experience harm. Now, however all of these various different appearances and phenomena might appear, It is not the case that they are truly existent in any which way. It is rather the case that we cling to the perception of these appearances, phenomena, as being real. We are conditioned in such a way that we think these things are truly real, they are truly existence, therefore they have either benefit for us or they bring about harm for us, and therefore they must be real, must they not? Now, it is only our clinging to our perception of that which we perceive as being real that makes these things so seemingly real. Truly, they are not. On the other hand, we could argue, or we could rather ask, well, if all phenomena and appearances are truly non-existent, free of any inherent self-nature, how come that I constantly perceive them? How come that I constantly see, perceive, touch all of these things if they are truly not, if they are not really existent in any way whatsoever? Well, the answer to that question is we have been moving about in this cycle of existence since beginningless time. We have been going through innumerable rebirths after rebirth, and in each and every one of these rebirths of ours, we have again confirmed and reconfirmed this habit of ours to perceive things as they are and to hold them to be truly real. We have made this such a strong habitual conditioning, we have made this so much into second nature that not even the idea crops up in our minds that something could be amiss with this erroneous way of ours of perceiving things.
Chekawa Yeshe Dorje then Malala, then Sir, your Tomjin, no one Tomjin or Semgan, no Chakona, Bachok, Tobla, Sharari. They is an appeal Malon down with the Java.
So, in this way, it is being said quite clearly how the entire outer world, plus all of its contents, whatever conceivably there might be, are empty of any self-nature, free of any inherent nature whatsoever, non-existent. Chekawa Yeshe Dorje uses the analogy of a dream here. He says, think of all appearances as being dreamlike. And dream is an appropriate analogy here, because we all know how when we dream, we see all kinds of things, all kinds of appearances in such dreams. There might be landscapes, there might be mountains and forests and rivers, there might be houses, people, animals, and so forth. And we take them all to be truly existent and real within the dream, but upon awakening out of such a dream, it is very clearly evident that there was no reality to any of our dream experience. In the same way, it is with everything that we perceive in the waking state. All of these appearances and phenomena, the world, its contents, its inhabitants, etc., are truly non-existent. The reason for our continuously perceiving them as such is none other but our habitual conditioning, which has been happening for limitless lifetimes, limitless rebirth, again and again, this habit of clinging to the perception of appearances and phenomena as being real, and this confirming and reconfirming lifetime after lifetime of this truly being so. Therefore, Chekawa Yeshe Dorje, who uses the analogy of a dream, has in this particular case used a very skillful analogy.
서로 연대 당시 담바 몸도 좀 왔다고 예 상내로 장이 서로가 요예도 무와 şeyla 통행 나랑 그자라 나자도 차도도 세당 그 도가지나 서로가 연대니 담바마도 몸다고 예 상 된 처음서는 나랑 산나 대지 파송 쳐봐 되니 된다와게 쳐봐 정나야 내 당시 몸도 좀 왔다고 예 상 정정한 나랑 나사도 동나라서 봐 강하는 내 당시요 담바마도 몸다고 예
So Chekawa Yeshe Dorje says quite clearly, again, look or regard all appearances as dreamlike. Then within the commentary to Chekawa Yeshe Dorje's words, the author of our text, of our commentary, Jamgön Kongtrul, says that being the case, or being asked to proceed in this way, we would be well advised to train ourselves in this a little bit. And he says, well, whatever it is that we might perceive in our waking life, we should look at it, we should indeed look at it as a dreamlike experience. Occasionally, because of our conditioning in such a way that we hold appearances and phenomena to be truly real, truly existent, all sorts of feelings and emotions well up within us. If we find an object that we consider desirable, then we want that object. We want to make it our own, and we think of how nice it would be to possess that object and do all sorts of things in order to bring such an object into our possession. We give rise to desire, and we act upon that desire. Now, if we were to take ourselves aback for a moment, instead of just jumping headlong into action, but looking at the situation as a whole, and to think for a moment, how if this were just a dream? This would be one way of approaching such situations. On the other hand, there might be unpleasant situations which we might wish to avoid, unpleasant situations in which all sorts of emotional defilements like pride, like jealousy, like anger, etc., arise within us. Again, instead of just acting upon these in a headlong way, jumping right into it and doing all sorts of things, we might again take ourselves aback for a moment and think, well, let me look at this situation as dreamlike, see what happens. In other situations, we might experience great happiness, great joy, and again, to view this as a dreamlike experience free of any reality would be good advice to put into practice. Or if we feel sick, if we feel painful, if we experience all sorts of negative, painful circumstances, again, we might regard them as being of a dreamlike nature and proceed accordingly. Therefore, in this way, Kongtrul Lodhithaya advises us not only just to let this be an intellectual exercise, but to actually put this into practice, to train ourselves in this advice. The same, describing the same circumstance, there is a quote by the third Karmapa, Rangjung, which comes from his famous Mahamudra aspiration, in which he says quite clearly, looking at objects of perception, there are no such objects. They appear as mental objects. He means to say the same thing. Whatever object we might perceive, we might see, we might perceive in whatever other way, they are not truly there. They are not truly existent. They're nothing else but the reflection of that we think to be there. And now we might have a little bit of time for some questions, should there be